All right, welcome back to the Mr. Gloat podcast. Today we are coming live. Today we're going to take a trip from February the 4th, 1990, where we visit an interesting story-filled moment in boxing history. But before that, we better come back to information-wise. Now, the last episode I did isn't that much to talk about. And for all intents and purposes, the last episode I kind of regret recording because technically it wasn't that entertaining for me. I really didn't like the last episode I recorded. Me talking about mostly about the boxing match from Zuffa Boxing that happened this week, and I've been typing in a lot of information for my new Observer of Paragraph Observer, and I've been typing in new information about to come out on the 13th of June. Every paragraph will be coming out on Saturday every week. So it's nothing much to say that I was really doing a lot of other stuff. And considering I'm thinking of just recording 10 episodes every month of Mr. Gloat, I'm thinking about maybe if my content isn't going to be that successful in Mr. Gloat podcasts, and maybe maybe by the month of January of 2027, which is where I'm just going to delete my Fox Wolf channel, because at that moment, the channel's done. I've already recorded the Hunger Game videos and the 100th episode, canceled everything else because no one cares about that channel anymore. It's a dead channel. There's no point to continuing with it. It was just a waste of time. It just had nothing to do with nothing, and no one still gave a dang about it. And I still blame God for it because he just didn't care. But it is the way life goes. We have to understand for reasons, and to this day, I'll never understand God. That's the way life goes. But anyway, let's get down to business and understand the boxing fights, what's happening. Rummy's Corner just released a new episode of Jesse the Bomb Rodriguez. And surprisingly, we are throwing in some new ideas for boxing in the world of professional boxing, because even though now this is what I do think about Jesse Rodriguez. Now, with all due intents and purposes, Eddie Hearn, I don't know what to say about Eddie Hearn, because Eddie Hearn puts out a huge misfire of what he's talking about. Now, I'm not going to credit Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn is a good promoter, a little bit better than his father, and we have talked about his father, Barry Hearn, after the WBO Heavyweight Championship, when Barry Hearn used to promote British champion that defeated Michael Bennett, the same guy that defeated Tommy Morrison, Herbie Hyde, back in the 90s, and he became a two-time champion by Barry Hearn Promotion, and that's the only success for Barry Hearn. But again, Eddie Hearn, I really don't know, because even though Eddie Hearn has been doing an okay job with Jesse Rodriguez, whether if Rodriguez is happy to be with him or not, I don't know. But just today, as I'm recording this on the 10th of June, which is Wednesday, Eddie Hearn puts out an interesting article which kind of shocks me. So on Ring Magazine, and there's only a couple information I want to talk about before I get to the February the 4th, 1990. And this is interesting. Now, there's a couple interesting paragraph of information here that I am surprised about. Like, Nonito Donaire points out that he believes that Bam Rodriguez has skills to beat Inoue, depending on who you're asking. But Eddie Hearn from Matchroom Boxing points out an interesting detail on Rodriguez. He states here on this 2-minute read, quote, Matchroom Boxing head Eddie Hearn as promoted him for the last 4 years and just re-signed Rodriguez as the number 4 pound for pound fighter to a new promotional deal. But the Brit, Hearn, believes that the 26-year-old won't be fighting past 2030. He believes that, quote, Bam is a fierce competitor, Hearn said on DAZN. He doesn't want to be around for 5 or 6 years. He wants the biggest fights as soon as possible before 30 years old. He could retire. I think even potentially before that. And then he points out he wants belts, undoubtedly, but he wants the biggest fights ASAP. And we should be celebrating that. For now, calling it quits is nowhere to be found on the calendar with Rodriguez, 23-0, 16 knockouts, as he makes the 118-pound debut on Saturday in Glendale, Arizona, against WBA bantamweight title holder Antonio Vargas, 19-1-1, 11 knockouts. And then the rest of this says, as it follows, he says this: if Rodriguez gets past Vargas, he plans to leverage the stage to challenge Naoya Inoue for the undisputed Super Bantamweight Championship in the sport's number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. Bam is like, don't wait, make it. He's ready to go from Vargas into Inoue, Hearn said. We are ready, but listen, Vargas has got a lot to say. It's a massive crowd coming in Arizona on June the 13th, and that's a big moment for him. If he wins, he'll be calling out Inoue. We're ready to make it happen. Outside of Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury, I think Rodriguez Inoue is the biggest fight in boxing. I think it's the best fight in boxing in terms of the ability, the prime of both men. It is massive fight. Rodriguez holds the ring, WBA, WBC, WBO 115-pound crown division, but he maintained that his days at the junior bantamweight, aka the super flyweight, are done. The last paragraph states here, Bam has a very tough fight against that Vargas. To try to become a 3-weight division champion, Hearn said, that's a great move towards 122. And it is the big step up at the 118 is going to be a perfect for his body right now at the 122 in another leap. I think this is the first time I've seen Bam actively calling out Inoue to fight out. And that is a real statement of the intent term of what he wants from his career. End quote. And let me counterpunch. That's a dumb idea. I don't think Bam should do that. I don't think one bit of any of it. I just don't think that should be a good idea. I think Hearn is pushing his fighter too much towards the sun. It's not a good idea. I just don't think Bam should do it. It's not. Like, I know he can beat Antonio. He's better than Antonio. The thing is, if you're pushing your fighter too close to the limits, that's not a good idea. Plus, here's the problem. Naoya Inoue, he's already pushing himself by fighting in, I'm going to assume, in September. So you're telling me that Bam is going to win. Inoue is going to wait for Bam to go up a few more pounds just so he can, let's just assume that they're going to fight in September. Maybe in October. Maybe November is actually good. So Inoue is going to wait like 5 or 6 months after his Nakatani fight, maybe by December, and then Bam is going to win this fight against Vargas and then fight this year. It would be a good fight for fighter of the year. Like, that could make Inoue. Like, Inoue's resume in 2025 was a maybe not better than Terrence Crawford, because Crawford only had one fight and Inoue had 4 last year. So I really can't say that's a good idea, because why would you want to go up to weight? Like, again, even though Crawford going up to weight was a huge problem, and even though Canelo was cherry picking his fighters one by one in his career after being undisputed and had legits, and then comes out to 2022 and then 2023 and then 2024, and nothing much to say about that. And the William Skull thing, it's like, what is going on? And even though Crawford went up to weight a lot heavier than he did, but then went on to lose some weight and then fought Canelo, win. Dude, here's the problem. Bam Rodriguez, even though he's 26 years old, he is the first ever male boxer to become a world champion in pro boxing, being born in the 2000s, because we are 26 years into this century. So, and again, back in February 2022, we took on Carlos Cuadras when he was a replacement for another fighter. He was 22 years old when he won that fight. So yeah, his reign of terror has been happening for now. If he does fight in a few days, this will be his 9th year in boxing. But again, I just don't, I don't want to see that. Like, good job for Bam. He'll win this fight. It's not going to be a legit. If I was in Bam's shoes, I would just fight Vargas and then fight for the WBA super bantamweight champion, Tetsuya. What's that guy's name that had that great fight last year against Daigo? What's the frick his name is? Higa. Yeah, Seiyu Tatsumi, I forgot, that defeated Daigo Higa, or that draw. Like, what's his name again? Vargas. Oh, no, Vargas. Oh, okay. No, so Tetsuya. Wait, did Tetsuya actually got his title vacant in the WBA? Interesting. Wait, what happened to Tetsuya, the WBA? Was he a super champion? I gotta double check this. I'm sorry for being too much of a talker here, but so Seiyu Tatsumi, what happened to him? That's interesting. So December, January. Okay, this is weird. What happened to the title? So Tetsuya Tatsumi was reinstated as title back in December the 1st, when Antonio Vargas was champion interim from May the 17th last year ago. Lost the belt in the 1st of December. Other champions, so... And then Tatsumi actually vacated his title again, so now Vargas is... Okay, I'm a little bit confused about that. Interesting. Really interesting. So actually, I really don't know what to say about that. I'm a little bit surprised about that. So technically, I guess Vargas is the WBA, not the regular champion, but the real champion. So yeah, Jesse Rodriguez, 3 weight class champion, not bad. But what I want to see, he beats Vargas, and maybe it would be interesting if Jesse Rodriguez fights against Inoue's brother Takuma, who's the WBC bantamweight champion right now, or Christian Medina or Jose Salas, the IBF champion. It's better to fight for those belts and then see if any of them are going for champ and then broke, and do that. I think that's what should happen. Also, by the way, there's some other champions out here, like Andrew Maloney defeated that Will DeBardo guy who doesn't care for the IBF belt. Just blah, blah. David Jimenez is the WBA interim champion for the last 2 years. He might be promoted to the WBA super champion as the super flyweight because of Rodriguez's vacancies. So that's whip-de-friggin'-do. So, yeah, pretty much. This is going to be an interesting talk about for boxing. But again, I just don't want to see that. Again, like, it's a good fight on paper, but when it comes to the blood and tears, I don't know. It's not good. Like, wait a couple more years, see if he can do a good fight, defeats Vargas, defeat another champion that year, see how dangerously good he is, and if he's that dangerous and he's that dominant for knockouts, have Inoue fight another fight this year against someone in September or October, whether it's going to be Nakatani's opponent, Hernandez, Sebastian, which would be a good fight to watch, just to see how Sebastian could handle Inoue like he did to Nakatani, or have a match with Sam Goodman for the heck of it if he doesn't duck again. Like, because at this moment, Inoue, like, after Inoue defeated Stephen Fulton, he has 8 title defenses. So Inoue has 8 title defenses, and if he goes for a 9th one against anyone else in the super bantamweight, which there's not a lot. I don't see a lot of good competition in the super bantamweight, which means Inoue might be running out of opponents. So if he beats someone else up this year, whether it's by knockout, and then maybe next year in 2027, like in the month of May, again, have Inoue fight Rodriguez instead. If Rodriguez can handle his weight against Vargas and then fight someone else in the fall just to handle his body proportion and then go up to weight from his unified champ in the bantamweight just to go up an extra couple more pounds to go for super bantamweight next year to fight Inoue for his 10th title defense, I would say that's good. I just don't think it's good. Again, he's too young. Like, Inoue is 33 years old. He's fought for 14 years in boxing, and at this moment, it's just not a good idea. It's not good. Like I said before, Nonito Donaire states that he thinks that Rodriguez is ready. I don't know. I really don't know. It's just too much to handle. Oh, and by the way, the last information we'd like to talk about, Michaela Mayer versus Chantel Cameron will be the unification in Birmingham on August the 29th. I don't know if that's going to be an MVP promotion or not. I'm going to assume it is, because I believe there was a fight, but this one is taking place in Birmingham, UK, so we don't know much about that. Eddie Hearn also points out the contract states for the venue in the UK. As Hearn pointed out, the Joshua and Fury fight would happen. We do have a few other ideas for Joshua, believing that Fury should have stopped the overmatch Makhmoudev after Tyson Fury won his last fight. But again, I really can't say about that because people aren't stopping their fighters. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Oh yeah, by the way, speaking about Fury, his brother Tommy Fury is fighting Tommy Fury, the guy that defeated Jake Paul and KSI. Oh, he's back in action, but not. He's taking on Eddie Hall in Misfits Boxing. Great. Yeah, let's just skip all that. All right, so time to get to February the 4th. So February the 4th, 1990. What has been going on in February the 4th, 1990? Well, here's the... Still trying to get used to this information. Like BoxRec, by the way, BoxRec has changed up their entire webpage, and it's so good. It's actually a lot better than what they're doing, actually. I actually love this environment of BoxRec. Like, BoxRec has done a lot better for what they're doing. So, good job for them making this a lot better than where it is. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to say February the 4th. Oh my gosh, okay. I'm still trying to get used to this. February the 4th, 1990, live in Sunday. What has been going on in Sunday in professional boxing? Nothing much. We do have a show in South Africa. Nothing much there. We do even have a fight in the Philippines, which is nothing much there. Fights in Indonesia, just one that's actually nothing much, nothing much. Dominican Republic, nothing much. So we actually have 3 shows in the USA, one in North Carolina, one in New York, and one in Nevada. North Carolina only has one fight. Even though on BoxRec, this fight with Marcelos Brown, a 9-0 fighter, takes on a debut fighter named Jim White, first round KO. The report stated here, quote, may be a phony bout. No other bouts showing from same date and location. Which is also the reason why I went to talk about this February the 4th, 1990, because it just makes you wonder that people stated that BoxRec is the best place to find records. But then you come across these random things like this one bout stating it's a phony bout. But then you look at it, it's like, well, the bout counts. And Marcelos Brown has been boxing for a long time. Like he seems like a decent guy. He has an interesting record, this or that, and he has a 33-18-1 record. He seems like a great dude. He was born in Hawaii. Is that a lie? No, it's not. Yeah, he lost against some nobody fighters in his career, and some that should have been great contenders, but they're not. But again, there were some fights from Darnell Nicholson and Lamont Brewster. When Brewster was 15-0 back in 98, he fought him. Tommy Morrison fought him in 95. Trevor Berbick in 94. And these fights were horrible losses because this guy was a nobody. And so, yeah. It just makes you wonder what a waste. But again, it does make you wonder. It just makes you wonder. As for the fights in the Queens, New York, nothing interesting. The entire show was just an amateur boxing tournament, which was the 1990 ABF Eastern Regionals final, which was one was a 139-pound fight, a 165, 106, and a 178-pound final. The 4 bouts were final bouts, and the fighters on these shows, I can't know much about. So pretty much that's just about it but at the end of the day, there's nothing much to say about that. Also, what's been going on in the world of wrestling? Well, it's better to keep all that secret. Okay, so for the show, let's go live on Las Vegas, Nevada in the Hilton by promoter John Jackson of Forum Boxing and Antonio Curtis, the matchmaker of Forum Boxing. This was live in Las Vegas, Nevada in the Hilton. The ring announcer was known as Jimmy Lennon Jr., who was there that night, live in NBC Sports Main Event. John Jackson is a decent promoter for his time from 1972 to 2003. He had his moments in his career until he retired for good in 2003. With his last promotional fight involving Kevin Kelly taking on Marco Antonio Barrera, which that fight in 2003 was for the Ring Magazine Featherweight World title, which Marco won. Kevin Kelly, no relation to the interviewer for interviewing The Rock. This is a different Kevin Kelly. So John Jackson did retire with a bang here for the fun of it. We'll get to Kevin Kelly later because there's another fun story moment about this whole boxing show we're about to talk about. But again, it's not terrible for all means necessary. John Jackson has had some interesting moments in his career and has promoted some fighters in his years. And he's one of those forgotten promoters like Cedric Kushner, the guy that promoted on with Hasim Rotman back in the day, and Axel Schultz with guys with George Foreman he fought with, and Francis Botha and Michael Moore he fought. So pretty much. And there's also a time when he promoted on with Bob Arum in Top Rank, when the time with Bernard Hopkins and such. And again, it's pretty interesting. So this was the only best fight in the entire show, the promotion on February the 4th. So I want to give credit to John Jackson for the fun of it. He's a decent person from Inglewood, California. And even though he passed away in 2017 on February the 16th, so it's almost been 10 years, so I do want to give my gratitude to him. And Antonio Curtis, the matchmaker at the time, has matchmade 54 shows in his career from the span of 1986 to 2001. And his last matchmake took place in 2001 on September the 8th, 3 days before the world changed in America, during the time when Jose Lopez versus Fernando Montiel for the WBO World Flyweight Championship, and Vasil Jairov defeating a guy named Julian Lederlau for the IBF World Cruiserweight Championship. And also, well, again, other fighters similar. So, yeah, pretty much. And I don't know much about his information, if he's okay or not, but all I can say is they do have some great moments here. So, technically, there are 7 fights on the show, and I can't find a lot of video footages of any of the fights. 4 of the fights that were non-title fights have a guy named David Sample that was a 1-0 fighter, scores a first-round knockout against a debut fighter of Byron Metal in 2 minutes and 52 seconds. A debut fighter named David Dixon scores a second-round knockout in his debut against a debut fighter of himself in round 2 by TKO. David Dixon would go on to have an okay career, but having a huge amount of losses. He lost against former champion Lionel Butler in 92 by DQ, lost someone by split decision in 90, had fights until he lost against Tony Tucker back in 96, former heavyweight champion, and Lance Whitaker, a promising contender back in the day. So nothing much about his career, but again, good start. We had an undefeated 1-0 fighter named Abel Asinamali, who lost a 6-round fight against a 3-2 fighter in 6 rounds. And a 6-round fight that went the distance named Ron Collins. Scores his 18th pro fight against a journeyman fighter with a 20-13-1 record. Unfortunately, Ron Collins, after this, would try to go on. He would become a USA Midwest middleweight champion, but lost against a journeyman fighter named Gilbert Baptist this same year in November by split decision. And then a year and a half later, he fought against Julian Jackson. Didn't do so well. Lost against other guys like Tyrone Trice and Otis Grant, who was also another promising boxer back in the 90s with an 18-0 record from Jamaica. And he had his moments of losing against great guys such as Roy Jones Jr. and Guibrado Andrade. You know, the same guy that fought against what's his name? Lucien Butte. You know, the fight where Lucien had all his energy and he got tired in the last round, and Andre hit him so bad and he knocked him down, got back up and knocked him down again in the final seconds of the round. And referee Marlon White was threatening him to go back because he was wasting time, giving Lucien Butte enough time to recover for the final seconds of the round. And then he came back from 6, even though the count was 10. They had that whole argument. That was the same fighter, and that guy fought him as well. So it just goes to show you that pro boxing comes full circle with all these other fighters that you look up on BoxRec, and you think to yourself, wow, that guy fought that guy, and he fought that guy. So it just goes to show you it's crazy. And if you guys don't know about Lucien Butte and that fight, just watch the finale of that fight with Andrade. And like, Andrade would have been the first Mexican to become super middleweight champion before Canelo Alvarez or anyone else, but and of course they did have a rematch, but Lucien did knock him out in the 4th round. So yeah, so those were the fighters Ron Collins was fighting. And again, it is what it is. He just didn't have much. He retired back in 95, and that was it, with a 24-5 record. Okay, so we had an IBF Intercontinental Welterweight Championship. Again, they stated that this was live on NBC Sports and such. Again, I'm going to have to double check this. Yes, so this was live on Main Event on NBC Sports World at the time. So there should have been fight footage of this. Daryl Latimore taking on Egulius Engels Pedroza from Venezuela. And again, information wise was hard. Like, we do have Engels Pedroza taking on Jose Rivera in 1988. No fight there. Taking on Lewis Howard in 2 fight in 92 for an intercontinental continental title. Again, there's no fight footage of this, so I don't know why there's no fight footage. And it kind of upsetted me because I really wanted to review this show from start to finish, and all the other fights I just couldn't find. The fight itself on BoxRec states that Engels Pedroza knocked out Daryl Lattimore for the IBF Intercontinental Welterweight Championship in the second round by TKO at 1 minute and 10 seconds. Engels Pedroza was a decent Venezuelan fighter. He had moments in his career having a great record. He lost against guys like Mike Johnson and Joe Rivera, who was somewhat of a journeyman type fighter. After he defeated Daryl Whittemore in 1990, he lost against some other random dudes like Curtis Summit, a guy that he should have defeated. Then he lost against some random fighters that I don't really know much about, like Lewis Howard, as talked about before, where there is fight footage of that. He lost against Bronco McKirk, who was a promising fighter back in the day. But yeah, again, his entire resume of his boxing career, I don't know much about. As for Daryl Lattimore, again, his career, he lost against some interesting competitors in his day, like guys like Roger Turner for the WBF vacant World Welterweight Championship a year later in 1991 by unanimous decision. He lost against some other guys. He was like a guy, like a journeyman. He wins fights, he loses fights. He lost against great fighters like Ronald Wright, who was a decent fighter back in his day, Keith Holmes, Larry Barnes in 93, and the other fighter in 94. Antonio Reese, who was a decent, promising competitor. Another random guy named Kip Diggs, which I never heard of, but the guy had a 19-0 record back in 95 when he fought him, so surprising. He must have been a good fighter. But the rest of the other competitions in his career were not good. So there's a lot of fighters I don't really know on this list, but still. But I'll get to the explanation why I wanted to talk about this fight and this show in just a moment. Reggie Johnson versus Ismael Negron. Ismael Negron was a guy born in Puerto Rico, living in Newark, New Jersey. Complete opposite, like Oscar Collazo, who was born in Newark, New Jersey, USA, and now living in Puerto Rico, and he's the minimum weight champion right now. So, funny. Again, I did type in information to find the fight footage. We do have fight footages of Ismael Negron and Reggie Johnson fighting in other fights on YouTube. We have Reggie Johnson KO, round 5 KO against William Guthrie for knockout of the year. You know, William Guthrie that got screwed out by Don King back in 97 or so after he won the IBF light heavyweight from leaving the promoter, and how, well, if you guys haven't heard about the story about the IBF and the FBI interrogating the commissioners at the time, you'll be surprised. It's crazy. It's a crazy documentary, and I would highly recommend watching it. It's pretty damn good. Again, Reggie Johnson and Ismael, there is footages of their fights on YouTube. But again, a lot of it is Reggie, and most of it, there is some for Ismael. Again, there is no footage. Ismael is not much of a good competitor in his career. He had a 14-5 record coming into this fight. Reggie was a 22-1-1 fighter for the IBF USBA Middleweight Championship. The fight ended in round 11 by TKO at 1 minute and 3 seconds. Reggie Johnson won the fight easily, and that was it. The only footage shown by Ismael Negron with his 16-10-1 record was nothing much good. He didn't have a great career. He was losing fights around his time. He did defeat some interesting journeyman fighters back in his day. Like, he defeated a guy named Tony Thornton, who was a promising contender back in the 80s. with an okay record. He lost against Reggie Johnson, as I said before, and he lost some fights later on. And back from 91, he did scored an interesting victory from behind. Just a year later, in 92, he fought against Julian Jackson, who showed no mercy for the Puerto Rican because Julian outboxed him in the first round in 50 seconds. And 5 months later, he lost against a guy named Jay Bell, and that was it. That was the end for Ismail. As for Reggie Johnson, said before, he would have a huge career until 2008, boxing his way forward. He did suffer a loss in his early career. And again, after this win, he would go on to fight other fights with guys like Eddie Hall and a guy named Greg Dickerson. And Al Long, who was a decent journeyman opponent back in the day. He lost against James Toney back in 91 by split decision, only to go on to become a middleweight champion in 92 against guys with Steve Collins, Lamar Parks, and then lost against John David Jackson, George Castro for the WBA middleweight title in 94. Which would also be involved with the first ever Japanese boxer to become middleweight champion in 95. So that right there says a lot. So, and the rest of it is all history for Roy Jones fight and blah, blah, Antonio Tarver in 2002. And so the rest was history. For reasons why there's no fight footage of this fight neither, I just don't understand. Okay, so the main event, and there is fight footage. There is fight footage of this fight. And I'm going to double check if there is. And surprisingly, there is. So, George Paez, which is his last name, George Paez versus the real life Sakura Hagiwara, Troy Dorsey, for the IBF Featherweight Championship. The reason I wanted to review this show was for one reason. Which is the record for the most punches landed in a title fight? I couldn't find out about that. Most punches thrown in a title fight does hold a lot of records in boxing. But for some reason, when I came across something on calpubox.com, they had an interesting list. Calpubox actually has a new system on statistical leaderboards. And one of them shows the 400 plus club. Now, I don't know what the 400 plus club was when I clicked on it, and it states here, most punches landed by one fighter in a championship fight. And when I saw the results and the most punches, I flipped. And seeing how it shows, and by the way, there's over a bunch of fighters that throwed over 400 punches that they landed, and some of these fights ended by knockout and victory wins, but a few of them ended by defeat by the opponent that landed the most punches. This fight, when I looked up the record on BoxRec, this is what it shows. So George from Mexico is a 33 2-2 fighter. Troy Dorsey is a 9 2-2 fighter. George from Mexico has been a long-time competitor from 84 to 2003. He did had his early problems in 85 and 86, suffering a loss, a draw, a loss, and a bunch of other moments. He did come back until 88 years later. He would become the IBF Featherweight Championship against Calvin Grove. And that also, fun fact, on August the 8th, 1984, which this was a 15-round bout, this stated online that the Calvin Grove and George fight was credited as the last 15-round title bout in a televised fight in the USA. So August the 4th, 1988 would be the last time that USA would televise a world title fight in a 15-round bout. Now, of course, around this time, the minimum weight division did sanction a 15-round bout in the minimum weight, which I have talked about before, and it wasn't a good finale, but again, so this wasn't the last time, but again, you can tell that the 15 rounds were coming to an end, so that says a lot. Surprisingly, George did come into that fight, and surprisingly, the 15-round fight was pretty tough. He barely won and got forward. He did had a title defense against Louis Espinoza, had a draw, he had a rematch with Calvin Grove in 89, won the fight by knockout, and then had a draw with Louis, had fights with Steve Cruz, and he decided to take a break, win some fights against some nobodies, and after Luke Gutierrez, he decided to cherry pick another fight against a guy named Troy Dorsey, who at this time, a guy born in Mansfield, Texas, wasn't that much of a fighter. His second pro fight was a defeat. He won his first pro fight back in 85. Took him almost a full year and a half to come back again just to lose by first round knockout. Wins another fight in 87, draws a fight, loses another fight by split decision against a guy named Tom Johnson, who at the time was supposed to be a decent fighter, which he would, but not much of a star as much. But a better record than Troy Dorsey. But again, Troy would try to recover from 87, win some fights in 88 against nobodies, had a draw. And then in 1989, he scores his first big win against a 16-0 one fighter named Anthony Boyle. Then comes back in that 10-round fight in August to score a 10-round knockout against a 14-2 fighter named Harold Rhodes for the NABF featherweight title. Now forget about the fighter, but the title is what mattered the most. So those two wins in 89 were really good. And it was almost similar like when James Buster Douglas defeated Oliver McCall in 89, and then months later he defeated Trevor Berbick, which gave him the opportunity to fight Mike Tyson, which was around the same time during this fight in February. So we are just that close to the fight with Tyson and James Douglas. So Troy Dorsey is in the same situation. And surprisingly, the fight itself really shocked me. Now, the fight, I will have to point this out. Troy comes into this fight and he shows no mercy. This fight reminded me like Sakura Hagiwara versus Jacko Tojo from episode 9 of Wanna Be the Strongest in the World by the anime show in the 2012, which was a failure, and the storyline basis was not bad in my opinion. The first 6 episodes made sense, but the other were just, what the heck is Sakura doing there? And I just wish they made the anime less inappropriate and a lot better. I don't know why they screwed it up and why they advertised boobs, but the Sakura Hagiwara should have defeated Jacko Tojo. Should have. She really should have. I don't know why. But that's what this fight reminds me of. So George comes in. He has this weird haircut of a bat in the back of his head. Like someone cut his hair. Like he has a bat and then has some weird cuts here, there in his hair. Troy is wearing this amazing hair. Like he's almost like the young version of... He looks like Richard Torres in my opinion. Like his hair is a little bit almost like Danny Noonan from Caddyshack 1. His hair is different. So again, here's the information I do want to know. So the fight, so this is what their tail of the tape is. The tail of the tape, both of them are orthodox fighters. Troy's 5'6", 5'5" for George. The stance doesn't matter, and that's it. So in the first round of the fight, Troy comes in and just without hesitation fights for the champion. He's throwing multitude of punches against George, and believe me, I'm not going to tell you how many punches he landed, but it's amazing. But again, he comes in, George, again, every time he gets pushed into the ropes, I just can't be bothered by the hair of George. Like, George's hair, he has his hair cut, but he still has this other hair in the back of his head slicked down. So he has a hair of this Batman type thing here, but then he has other strands of hair. Like, I don't know what about the haircut. It's ridiculous. I didn't like it. It's just so hard to see. So the first round was for Troy, easy. We come to the second round. He pushes George. He's putting the effort in. He's putting the adversity. He's putting everything in. And with 1 minute and 20 seconds into the second round, George comes in and lands this amazing, this left uppercut, right, left, or left, right. And then Troy loses out his balance, hits the canvas, down for a knockout. He gets back up, but it doesn't stop him. He still throws punches because I guess he wants to try to knock him out so he can win back the round. I don't know if that's a good idea, because if you got knocked down in the first round, should it be better to, yes, you don't want your opponent to think that you're going to be hurt or so you might as well try to not use up all your energy, because you're not going to win this round because he knocked you out. If you get knocked out, even if you were winning the round, that guy's still going to score 10-8 scores. Again, Troy still tries to attack him as best he could. And the knockout was crazy. It was so amazing. And even when Troy hit his butt on the canvas, George almost landed a left and might have caused him a point abduction if he did that, if he hit him while he's on the canvas. By the way, every time a round starts and they get back to the ring to start another round, Troy Dorsey's boxing stance and him coming out of the ring and coming forward face to face, his boxing strat isn't that good, but he does have that interesting ability. He blocks out punches as best he could. George sometimes will throw a punch, Troy ducks, sometimes he gets connected with it, but he still puts out more pressure. He's throwing out multitude of great right left on combinations. Sometimes George is trying to block his punches like this, like a George Foreman type thing he does. Again, Troy was on fire, and he was handling the fight like never before. He was just that good. And good as I may say, because is there any point that he might have deserved it? And we're going to get to that in a moment. Because it just makes you wonder who won the fight. So we come into the fourth round, and again, Troy just does as he does. Just like in the fifth round, just like in the sixth. He is outboxing George in every single out-punching him. The entirety of it is just going for it. He goes for it with each pump. And every time he just tries to shove him on. And there's a moment in fourth round where he even tries to put his left arm right into the knuckle and even tries to shove out George to block him while he's still punching him a multitude of times, and then lets go, and then he throws his arm back and just starts throwing multitude of punches again while he's in the neutral corner with him. Like, Troy's boxing strats might not be good for a great pro. And there was a moment during the end of that, with 1 minute left of the round, George finally pushes him, and the referee warns them for that. The referee's name is Carlos Padilla, which nothing much to say about him. But again, oh boy, the hairpiece. Like, again, The hairpiece is so weird. I still don't like the haircut. I still don't like it. Again, rounds 5, round 6, round 7, round 8. Every round, Troy was landing over 50 to maybe 100 punches in those rounds, and those rounds were legit dominance. There was a moment in round 5 when Troy, during the last minute of the 5th round, Troy tried to go forward and again goes back, and George throws a huge Deontay Wilder hook, and he almost hit the referee and lost out his balance, and Troy pushes him back. And like, that moment right there was also crazy enough. I was like, man, how did George not lose his balance from throwing a huge baseball swing bat on that one? Crazy. Again, the first half of the fight was so good, and like coming after 8 rounds, it was no doubt about it that Troy was dominating the round like never before. He was throwing everything he did. He was dominating the fight like never before. And even though the punches might not have been legit, were scary. Like I said before, he goes into the 4th. He goes to the 5th. There's a replay that showed the 6th round where Troy lands this perfect punch, which knocked out George's head back in a replay. It was scary. Coming into the 7th round, George is putting his right hand onto the rope, gliding onto the rope, backing away, and the referee tells him to don't do that. George is struggling so much, he can't even do nothing, and Troy is just out punching him with multitude of punches. At this moment, they might have been landing 400 punches already. And if you want to count the punches they've thrown, by the way, if people have the boxing numbers for Kalpubucks for the most, if any of you people have information for Kalpubucks statistics for the most punches thrown, if someone can give me information for the George versus Troy Dorsey 1 fight for the entirety, because I just want to know how many punches were thrown total in that fight, just for the heck of it. Again, like I said before, Troy Dorsey was outboxing him. He was throwing out punches, landing body punches ever and ever again. And again, George was still having problems, missing out punches. And it seemed like Troy did got tired during the 7th round after the end, even though he did manage to get stuff done in the 8th round, because come round 9, George finally comes in, starts dancing his way. Now he's actually trying to dance, do some crazy shish kebab stuff going on right now. And Troy is finally getting punched. And even though there's moments that he's laying out punches and George is finally pushing in, doing everything he could to get the remainder rounds, and he finally gets in a good round. There's a moment that he was sitting his butt on the neutral corner with 1 minute 10 seconds of the round, and I'm like, what are you doing, George? George had some weird ideas for what he was doing. It was crazy. And then comes to the 10th round of the fight. By the way, George actually won that round, definitely, and George would actually win round 10 and round 11, in my opinion. The 12th round will be the talk about for this fight. So George in rounds 10 and 11, he just starts to find his groove. But even though George was landing out punches, Troy was doing in a good offensive motion as best he could. Even though George was getting a little bit more aggressive and getting more punches thrown in, it depends on who you thought won the round. If you thought Troy was winning the round, then maybe he was. But again, it just seemed like George was doing a little bit better in the championship rounds. He was finally getting stuff done in. And the knockout in round 2 would be the effectiveness. So even if both guys scored 6 rounds against each other, the knockout in round 2 would be the change of the entirety of the fight. Again, Troy is still pushing George back as best he could, landing out punches. But again, George was finally trying to get his motions in. Like, both guys are throwing multitude of punches at each other back and forth a bunch of times in round 11. They're not doing the clinching. They're not doing nothing. They're just getting all of the stuff going on here. Like, I just can't describe the punching that they're doing. It's ridiculous. And by the way, the judges' scorecards are different. So judge number 1, Robert Bird, spelled with a Y, not an I, Bird. He had the fight scored He had this fight scored. Yeah, he had this fight scored 105 to 103 for George. So he won the fight easily. So technically, George had that judge winning the fight before coming into the 12th round. Dave Moretti, considering he gave round 3 a 10-10 score, okay, had it 105 to 104 for Troy Dorsey. So if Troy actually gets that last round in, then he got that fight won. While Juan Jose Ramirez had the fight 104 to 104 even, which means he was the decider for this 12th and final round. So what happened in the 12th and final round? Well, just like Sakura Hagiwara versus Jacko Tojo, which should have been a win for Sakura. We don't know why the creators thought that she should lose another fight for being a jobber. Comes in, both guys touch gloves, and they're swinging at each other like they're just throwing bombs at each other. The referee's still trying to push them back as best they could. Both are throwing multitude of heavy hingers, heavy dingers, heavy clingers. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. All I know is Troy was pushing him to the neutral corner, laying out punches. George pushes him away to get him back. Now they're back to the ring. He pushes the George corner to the team. He's laying out multitude of punches, multitude. George is throwing out multiple uppercuts from here to there. He's missing every single one of them. Troy is landing every single one of his punches. He's going forward, backward, upward. George cannot land one punch, but there are some punches that he could have landed, which he did. Troy is outboxing him, outthrowing him with 30 seconds left of the fight. He's throwing him to the other neutral corner. He's throwing everything he's got at him, landing everything they got. The crowd are on their feet. The bell rings. What an amazement. And George did manage to land an okay punch on Troy, missed on a punch. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was a great win for Troy there for round 12, and he went in there like a monster. And just to let you guys know, I don't know the CompuBox punch statistics for how many punches were thrown in this fight by both guys, but on the CompuBox 400 plus club, states that Troy Dorsey landed 620 punches in this 12-round fight. And the judges, what did they see? Well, Robert Byrd did give the 12th and final round for Troy, even though the score was 114 and 113 for George. So he had that round won either way. He won the fight either way. Dave Moretti, he gave the last round to Troy. 115 to 113. And without that 10-10 score in the third round, well, get rid of that 9 for George, then it would have been 115 to 112. Just like me. I had it 115 to 112. But Juan decided to be a complete jack. He gives the 12th and final round 114 to 113, winner by split decision, George Paez. Jimmy Lennon Jr. announces the winner. George's team is celebrating. The camera cuts to Troy Dorsey putting his hands like this. He can't understand why. It's almost like watching it. It's like, why did the creators of the show wanted Jacko to defeat Sakura Hagiwara? Like, that's what made me felt seeing Troy Dorsey's putting his hand behind his head. The announcers are confused. It's so upsetting. What is going on? I don't know why they did dirty to him, and I'm still trying to find out how many punches were thrown or landed in total by all guys. Again, 620 punches landed in a 12-round fight by a guy that had a 9-2-2 record, and he lost the fight? Dude. By the way, the most punches ever landed in a 12-round fight by that fighter that won was back in July the 14th, 2009, when Roman Gonzalez defeated Katsunari Takayama in the 108-pound class by landing 594 punches to win a 12-round fight. And fun fact, James Toney had 4 pro fights in his career. From 1992 to 1994, he defeated guys like Glenn Wolfe, Tony Thornton, Charles Williams, and Iron Barkley. Both of those fights all went 400 punches landed by James Toney. 401 on Iron Barkley, knocking him out in the 9th round. A 12-round KO fight by Charles Williams, 420. 431 for Tony Thornton, and 468 on Glenn Wolfe. James Toney is the only guy that's had 4 pro fights that landed 400 punches. And Roman Gonzalez has done it 3 times. One in 2011 and again 2012 with guys like Manuel Vargas and Juan Estrada. And again, in a 15-round fight, the most punches ever landed in a 15-round bout by a single fighter was Greg Hagen back in February the 6th, 1988, when he landed 448 punches on Vinny Pazienza. Like, that right there is ridiculous. And those aren't a lot of punches landed. There's other fights here that have a lot of punches being landed over 500. It's ridiculous. Troy Dorsey is the only guy that's landed 600 punches in a title fight, and he hasn't won. Like, why did they do that? I don't know why they did that, and it just makes you wonder why. What's the point? Troy Dorsey deserved to win that fight. It was ridiculous. It wasn't good. It just wasn't meant to be like that. Like, the competition is ridiculous. Like, even though information did have their moments here, but again, even though George did had an okay moment fighting this fight, but again, this was a cherry-picked fighter with a guy that barely had 10 fights in his career, and they weren't great competition to talk about. And he gets outboxed by this guy. It's not good. Like this has to be one of the greatest good fights I've ever seen in history. And even though Dorsey might have not had a lot of great skills in his career and might have not been a great fighter, he still went in there and did his damn best. And he lost this fight. So what happened? What happened after this fight? What did both guys do? Well, just to end this episode with a bang, so this is what happened. By April of 1990, 2 months later, both Dorsey and George did fought in the same venue where Dorsey defeated an 8th round TKO against a 23-4-3 guy. And Dorsey took on Louis Espinoza again, like last year ago. This time he won by split decision. And then in July, both guys had a rematch against each other. Only this time that Espinoza fight 3 months ago was for the WBO Featherweight Championship. So IBF and WBO were on the line. This was a 12-round fight as well. And again, I had this fight won pretty much. I had Troy Dorsey winning round 1, round 2 about, round 3, round 4, round 6. Barely had him winning round 8. And then he won the 12th and final round without a problem. I had 115 to 113. One judge had 115 to 113, Jerry Lee Roth, giving it for George. Dobby Shirley, 116 to 112 for Troy. And Keith McDonald had 114 even. It was a split decision draw, and Troy still didn't win the fight. So what happened then? Well, George decided to go all hell's rising and decided to go up weight class. He vacates his world featherweight titles. And 2 months later, he fights against another guy named Tony Lopez for the IBF Super Featherweight title. He lost. What did they do to the IBF belt? Well, they gave an opportunity around November. Troy scored another draw against some other fighter. And then in June of 1991, he fought against a 22-6 fighter for the vacant IBF Featherweight title against a guy named Alfred Rangel. And Troy showed no mercy. He scored a first-round KO at 2 minutes and 37 seconds to become world champion. Finally. As for George, he would go on to fight some fights to get some winnings back. He did score an okay win in 1991 and got a big win against some other guys. He lost against guys like Parnell Whitaker, a decent fighter. Guys like Rafael Ruiz, who was another interesting fighter back in the day. Journeyman fighter named Freddie Pendleton back in 93, who had a 34-17-4 record, and that was for the IBF World Lightweight title. And George lost, surprisingly. He lost against other guys like Oscar De La Hoya in 94 for the WBO title, vacant for De La Hoya's first title win. Lost against other guys by disqualification, split decision, and nobody fighters by 97. Lost for a WBU title against Angel Manfredo, Angie Sanchez, Jose Luis Castillo in 99. And went on to fight nobody fighters for another several years until 2003, winning all fights. As for Troy, well, after his win, a couple months later, he fought against Manuel Medina, who had an okay 40-3 record, a more experienced, dangerous fighter than Troy. Surprisingly, Troy went into there, dominated round 1, knocked down Medina in round 2, and then I think he did it in the third round as well because there was also another 10-8 score. And he was waiting to fight until Medina came in rounds later and just started outboxing him from 4-12. Well, I did have round 7 for Troy winning, but again, all rounds were scored 114-12 for Medina winning the fight. The other judges had it fair. Medina won the fight, but still, Troy did an okay job in the beginning part of the fight, giving Medina a run for his money. So yeah, he had to earn it. So good job for him. And then, of course, Kevin Kelly, as we talked about before, that took on a fighter, not the Kevin Kelly of WWF, interviewing The Rock. This is a different Kevin Kelly. Later fought, that had a 26-0 record, fought against Troy Dorsey, and he defeated Troy, so good for him. Troy would lose against guys like Calvin Grove, as talked about before, Oscar De La Hoya, who was 7-0 at the time back in 93, Eddie Hobson, who was a decent contender. And by the end of 94, because of those fights, Troy retired by the end of the year. He did come back in the spring of April of 96 to win a fight against a nobody, and then take on Jimmy Bradali, who was one of the brothers from Denmark that was a dangerous fighter back in the day. And Troy defeated him by a round 7 retirement in the 7th round, when Jimmy did not answer the 8th round. And that was for the IBO World Super Featherweight Championship, which means if that belt becomes major one day, Troy Dorsey would be a 2-time champion. And the thing is, Troy Dorsey's record at the time was 13-9-4. Ridiculous. But again, that time came to an end because Troy did fight some other fighter in April, which he would win, which those wins would be his last greatest. He lost against guys like Jesus Chavez in that same year. In 98, he lost against Gabriel Ruiz, heartbreakingly, to settle a 15-win, 11 losses, 11 knockout, 4 draws, and that's it. So all in all, not a great career for Troy Dorsey, but an interesting story-filled moment just to go to show you that don't give up because something might happen. Troy Dorsey might be one of the most cherry-picked fighters in his career, and him being a 2-time champion in boxing, from an IBF featherweight to an IBO super featherweight, that's pretty good. So I got to give him credit. As a cherry-picked boxer, as a cherry-picked fighter, I say that's pretty good. But again, who knows? So all I can say about Troy Dorsey, from George Paez and Troy Dorsey, this entire fight, this entire show is pretty good. I just feel bad that there's no fight footages of any of the fights that happened that night. I guess they only had the main event show. And even though back then there were archive footages, were hard to find. And it stinks that archive just don't follow up these shows because professional boxing is not a. The thing is, HBO, Showtime Boxing, The Zone, and many other programs do not promote one promoter. They broadcast all different types of promoters. That's the reason why WWE and professional wrestling, from TNA to WCW and other promotions back in the day in professional wrestling and MMA, rest in peace to Bellator and Pride, they had their own broadcasts from other areas, from UFC to Bellator and such. That's how good they were, because they had their own broadcast, promoters, and other championship belts, and they can have their own archives. In professional boxing, they don't have that. So it is hard to find the footages that we're looking for, and they don't exist. So it does stink. But all I can say is, it's a pretty good show for Troy Dorsey. It goes to show you that never give up on life, and that's all I can say. So, yeah, congratulations for the entirety of this. It was a great. I really enjoyed the fight. I really enjoyed talking about it, and it was pretty fun for what it was. I really enjoyed it. So, thank you, viewers, for watching this. And with that being said, I hope you viewers enjoy it. When we come back next time, we are going to try to review June the 13th and review every show, and it might take a few days, so I might take my time to release all these videos as best I could. So all I can say is congratulations, and we'll see you next time. It's going to be a doozy, so we'll be right back after June the 13th. So stay tuned for more updates, and we'll see you then.